We're back. This is Tiff,
Kara,
Seb.
and today we're going to talk about beneficial and predatory insects.
So in our living soil ecosystem that we have, it's pretty typical to look down at the soil and see things moving around, or even whenever you're looking at the buds, sometimes you might see something walking along that you might not be exactly sure what it is. And these are beneficial bugs and insects, like she said, that we use. It's not typical to see anything moving in a hydro or cocoa environment down in the soil. They may use some beneficials up top, but that's kind of why we're going to dive into some of these things that we use down below.
for sure. And some of these are good at controlling pests, and that's why they're called predatory mites or insects. And some of these are more beneficial for the soil at helping decay and break down some of that stuff. And even it kind of goes hand in hand. They're also being predatory by feeding on the pupa or the larval stages of the bad guys, the insects that are harmful to the plants. And that can be kind of a deterrent for some people when going organic. You know, you can't spray any pesticides, so controlling those bugs is a factor in people's minds when they're talking about growing organic. And well, we're just here to talk about there are ways to do that and still be organic, and alternate methods to using pesticides.
Well, I don't like bugs at all.
Yeah.
Like out in the world, I don't like to encounter bugs.
Yeah.
And so I was a little bit like, oh, this is going to be sick. But it's not. Like, it's in there, it's not.
They kind of mind their own business.
They mind their own business. They're doing their job. They're all working.
Yeah,
and
sure.
sometimes when they're not doing their job, we tell them to do their job. Like the ladybugs will get out and we're like, get in there and get to work.
Yeah, if they're
You see 'em
wandering.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we've got a list of different beneficial insects, and we're gonna just kind of talk about each one.
So when you start organic growing, or if you visit an organic farm, it's pretty typical, at least in the beginning, to see fungus gnats. They're pretty hard to beat and they blow up like crazy. So once you have a few, you usually have a lot. And some of the things we use to really battle these, because in the beginning we did have fungus gnats and now there's none at all, would be the H. miles mite. These are little tiny, fast-moving mites in the soil. Sometimes it's really hard to see them. You have to really be paying attention. But they're down there, and they eat fungus gnat larvae and help decline the population. But in assistance with those for fungus gnats would be rove beetles, and these are a little bigger than the mites. Yeah, you can actually pick these out and see them moving around. They're kind of long and I say long and slender. I mean, they're still tiny, but
they're still small.
But comparable. I mean, they're kind of skinny, and you can see the way they move around. They kind of snake around, and those are the biggest contributor in co-op with the nematodes. But those definitely were a big help to getting rid of the fungus gnats in our grow, and they're great for just all soil health in general.
For sure. And the rove beetles, I believe they feed on several insects that are harmful to the plants as well, like thrips and the larval stages of thrips.
Which is great.
That is a great
Yeah.
sign right there. Also, every time we have a mushroom, so the fruiting bodies of the mushrooms that you guys see that we post in our beds, those mushrooms don't have a long life.
No.
Sometimes the next day they'll be all the way decayed and dying. Like, it's very short. So, but a lot of the times when I go and look at one of those dead mushrooms, I just see an abundance of those rove beetles on there eating and reproducing, and so that kind of boosts their populations in our facility.
Yeah, they kind of congregate around that fungus.
Yeah, they do.
It's interesting.
They think it's a party house.
You'll go and look at an old mushroom and there'll be rove beetles all over it. It's pretty cool.
That is cool.
Yeah. So like we said, with organic growing, you have you're having to use bugs to fight pests. So some things we've used in the past to battle spider mites, if we've seen a spider mite, or it's really the majority of this is about trying to prevent.
Yeah,
you know, we want to
preventative more than.
we want to be less reactive,
Mhm.
more proactive. So introducing Persimolis and Californicus mites. These are very small. Most all of these bugs we talk about are tiny. Really hard to see. I think the Californicus, one of the two is actually red, and that's how you can kind of pick them out when they're on your plant. You can see the orange tint moving around, but super small, and they battle mites, things that are going to attack the actual leaves of the plant.
Another thing that we added to our grow environment is nematodes, beneficial nematodes. And they sell a triple threat blend of these nematodes. So there's 3 different kinds, the SF nematode, HB, and SC. And each of these types of nematodes kind of targets a different pest in the soil. And so the list is very long, including grubs and June bugs, some types of ants, different weevils, and a lot of things that can be harmful to your plants. Thrips.
Was it aphids too?
I don't believe so because they're not soil borne.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, these are mainly aphids survive on the plant, and
That's what the ladybugs were for.
yes,
Yep.
yeah, and some of those guys above the soil.
Nematodes are also in our tea, so we buy beneficials to directly put in there, but also whenever we put like a slide of our compost tea or our worm tea into the microscope, we can see nematodes from our own brew that are moving around in there. So they're in abundance just naturally, but you can buy packs full of good guys to put in.
And they mainly come in a little pouch that looks like sawdust. And what's weird about nematodes is that they're microscopic, so you actually cannot see them at all, and which is pretty weird.
Right. Y'all bought sawdust.
Yeah, we bought some sawdust.
But you can find them under
Yeah.
you can see those
I
guys
think
in
we
there.
had 50 million of each type when we applied them, and there's a calculation you can do to figure out how much you need based on how much square footage of soil you're putting them into. But basically what they are is they're a parasitic little microscopic worm, similar to a roundworm or something like that. And what they do is
They're
find...
kind of yucky to look at.
Yeah, Tiff doesn't like that. But I will say they're pet safe, they're human safe, like they're not going to hurt mammals if you have the right kind. Basically, they will find their host body, which is any of those bugs that I mentioned before that they attack, and they'll infect them like a parasite and start reproducing within the I'll just use like a June bug for an example. They'll get inside that June bug, start reproducing, and literally eat their way out of it, and then go find another bug to attack.
Sounds like a horror movie.
Yeah, they're vicious, but that's a great thing if you have pests.
I'm so glad it's on a little teeny scale.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and you can't see it.
Yeah.
This is like nature's way, though,
Yeah, that's cool.
of helping the plants grow, and partnering with the plants and thriving in that kind of a way.
So one thing that we can actually culture in our own facility would be springtails. Super tiny little white bugs, and in the cultures that we have, when we open the lid, we can see them kind of jump around, and that's how we can see them being active. They kind of twitch on the top of the water, and they float on top of water. So it's pretty. It's a weird thing to look at. But springtails eat fungus and pathogenic funguses. So when we introduce them into our beds, it's kind of just to help that breakdown process and keep everything in check. Their populations rise, and I think some things like even the H-miles mite and some rogue beetles eat springtails. So if your springtail population gets out of hand, which I don't really think is possible, these guys could help you out, but springtails are just there to eat decaying matter and fungus to just help break things down. It's all about that organic process.
And it's a food web, so like Seb said, a lot of these bugs eat each other some of the time, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. That's just life, keeping each other in check.
Yeah, even rove beetles with bigger rove beetles, sometimes you'll see different sizes in your garden, and the bigger ones are a little more predatory, and sometimes they'll eat the smaller ones, and it's kind of just like they just keep each other in check, just like outside with the bigger animals.
Yep.
You have things eating each other all the time. It's the same with these little guys, even whenever they're beneficial.
Yep, pretty weird.
Yeah, it is.
So those are some of the smaller beneficial insects that are harder to see with your eye, but there are beneficial insects that are bigger, that are easy to see, and some of those include ladybugs, praying mantis, or assassin bugs as well. And a lot of these guys I never knew were beneficial at all. Like I don't know what I thought they were doing.
Little bug.
Yeah.
Well, I think regular humans are just like, oh, those guys are here.
Yeah, you just blow them off
don't
like
think
they're
about
not
what they
doing
do.
a job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're doing a job.
Mm-hmm.
But ladybugs, they attack spider mites and aphids. Green lacewings as well. They're really good, and they attack aphids, spider mites, and a lot of these guys attack the things that are living on the foliage. Like kind of, I hinted at that earlier. Stuff that is on the foliage, eating at the plants and being detrimental to the plants. Those guys can help fight that fight.
Yeah, and exception of the praying mantises and the assassin bugs, with the lacewing and the ladybugs, their larvae actually do the majority of the work. So you introduce the adults. Sometimes you can buy the larvae too, but when you introduce them, your main goal is reproduction, so that their larvae can, kind of do the job, because they eat more per day, so to say. Like the adults, just their lifespan isn't as long, and they're not as active whenever they're up like that. So the larvae both look similar. Ladybug larvae have some black and orange stripes on them. They look a little bit scary.
You would never know it's a ladybug larva.
Yeah,
I'm
they
sure.
look.
I didn't know what they looked like before
But
this.
I've seen 3 of them in the wild since we've
once-
started. I'm like, hey, that's a ladybug larva.
Once you know, you'll pick them out. But
Yeah.
until you know what it is, it kind of looks like a mean little bug, and
Mm-hmm.
they're really gentle little guys. They'll crawl around on you and stuff. But the difference between the two, the lacewing, they're kind of just like a tan color. Not as fun to look at, but they do the same work. They eat aphids, and lacewings turn into a bigger winged adult, where they actually fly around. The ladybugs are small. I mean, everyone knows they have wings, but they fly a little different than the two.
Yeah, for sure. And praying mantis, those guys, you would probably not need as many as you do with the ladybugs and the lacewings, because they're more predatory, and
Who are they getting?
they eat the same things.
Yeah,
The
aphids,
aphids
mites.
and spider mites,
Mm-hmm.
and same with assassin bugs. We haven't really used praying mantis or assassin bugs in our facility as much, but I'd like to try incorporating them more. Assassin bugs, they do have a more potent venom, and if you get bit by one, it can be a little bit painful. So,
We've caught a few.
away.
We've caught a few
some.
outside and brought them in, but we don't have any mass numbers of assassin bugs or anything.
For sure.
Just a few floating around.
We don't want to make it hard to go in there and garden.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. We like to have some diversity, so we bring in a few
Right.
that we've done on our own. But
For sure.
But I don't see us ordering like 500 of those.
right, yeah,
fellas.
we're not going all out with the assassin bugs or anything.
For sure. And some of these bugs aren't necessarily predatory, but their castings help aid soil fertility.
Yeah.
So isopods are a great example of that, and springtails honestly too. The isopods, that's kind of just your roly-poly or pill bugs is what a lot of people know them by, but you'll see them in the soil. They're kind of like the cleanup crew, and they'll be eating on any decaying matter like leaf litter or
Breaking it down.
yeah,
Yeah.
mulches and stuff like that. A lot of people, so if you have regular grays, which is just your regular gray roly-polies that you see outside a lot, those guys, if they get out of hand, they can actually start eating on your plants, but you can help prevent that by having a really good mulch layer for them to be happy and feed on, and also by getting exotic versions of these isopods, and
Mhm.
Rubber Ducky Isopods sells those. So if you want to apply that in your garden, you can buy a culture from him. And we did that, and we've been breeding them in our facility. So we have a little shoebox where we just put a little bit of soil in there and some leaf litter, and we feed them like constantly. When we go take clippings, we'll just put them in that shoebox and get them used to eating the stuff in our facility. And then when the population starts growing, we'll either separate in half and create 2 cultures of that going on, or we will add them to the beds slowly. So
with isopods, there's a few that work together. So with designer isopods, like they are certain species and they look different. With the grays outside, depending on where you live, you will see different isopods, but they all kind of have the same look, like the brown or gray look to them. And it's hard to know what exactly you're getting. So like Kara said earlier, when they blow up and you have these browns, you know, sometimes they can attack your roots and not be so great for your plants. But that's why it's hard to know exactly what you're getting. So we took the more practical approach, and we go with the designer isopods because we know they can't be detrimental. They won't target our plants at all, no matter what, and they'll just keep eating this organic matter.
sure.
So that's kind of like, that's just why that you have to know why you shouldn't be throwing in all these grays all the time and stuff like that.
If you do have a problem, we've seen other grows. I think Haifa Grown did this, and you just take a potato, put it in your soil, and they go eat on that, and you can take it,
Get them out of there.
throw it away, get rid of them.
Yeah.
Throw them outside.
Yeah. But the isopods that we have right now are zebra isopods, and I really like the look of them.
Yeah,
they're
cool.
black and white stripes, and another version that I would really like to apply to our garden eventually is dwarf whites. So they're a little bit smaller. That's why they're called dwarfs, and they live more deep down in the soil, and they're a little bit deep divers. They dig, and whereas the zebras like to stay on the top.
Yeah.
Well, not on the very top where you can see them.
Because they don't like the sun.
Yeah, they hide.
It's hard
from
to
the light.
find them, but they're towards.
They're more shallow, is what I meant. Yeah.
Right. And they're digging little trails and paths and causing
Bits of aeration and oxygen and things to fall
and the
in.
water goes through. You know,
Exactly.
just helps the
Yeah.
soil.
Yeah, they're helping out with these little pathways, just like worms would do. The isopods are doing it on a small scale up top. In our recent post, we showed Uno the toad. We actually have, I think, 3 in our facility total, but Uno's the most chill. Uno hangs out, and we can always see him up there. The other ones are a little hard to find
Sometimes we lose them. All right.
But you know, it's part of the garden. It's what they do. They're doing their job. Kara went in to talk about a little bit of what they do. They can eat crickets and grasshoppers if they make their way into our facility, and kind of just keep us in check with the bigger insects that may make it in. But they're really kind of a test to see if what we're doing is okay. So Kara can kind of tell you a little bit about what they do with that.
For sure. So toads, they don't actually drink water. They absorb moisture through their skin. And I've had lots of pet toads growing up. Just our family is
We're a little
bit weird, you know? And so I've had a lot of crazy pets growing up, but toads are some of my favorite to keep, and accidentally, as a little kid, I gave it tap water, and that ends in a casualty a lot of the time. You know, since they absorb through their skin, those chemicals can actually be harmful to them and fatal and end up killing them. And so the fact that we have toads in there that are able to survive and live is it helps us keep in check that what we're doing is natural and not harmful to them, because if we were adding any sort of synthetic fertilizer, it would be fatal to them.
Yeah, they can't handle that.
No.
Yeah, if we were spraying anything that was really harmful, any pesticides that were harmful, it would show quickly.
Yeah,
These
they
guys
wouldn't be
wouldn't
able
there anymore.
to survive.
So the toad in our grow is similar to the canary in the mines. And they would take the canary down.
Yeah.
And as long as it's singing, everybody's good. As long as this toad's happy and hopping around and getting fatter, then what we're doing here is healthy and good.
Exactly. Yeah, the toad is kind of our marker, our tester.
And someday it'll just naturally die, you know. Just because it dies doesn't necessarily mean
No,
that
yeah.
something has gone wrong, because they have a lifespan. But if all of our toads die in the same day or in the same week,
Like,
then maybe we
yeah.
should check out what's going
Right,
on. You
right.
know?
Yeah.
So it's just kind of an indicator for us to make sure what we're doing is safe and organic.